Hello everybody and welcome to the third video in our series of videos on life in the Middle Ages. As always, we begin with our learning outcomes, so by the end of this presentation you guys should know the structure of the keep and what was on each floor. You guys should know 3 facts about what might happen in the Great Hall, and finally you guys should know the buildings that might have been inside the bailey of a castle. While we as historians do tend to put things in chronological orders, as we move through our study of the Middle Ages, we will be looking at aspects of life in the Middle Ages and events that highlight the importance of this aspect of the Middle Ages. So instead of going chronologically, we will be taking themes more so. So today we are going to be looking at the barons or the lords of the Middle Ages. We already looked at the structure of the stone castle that came with the Normans, but now we will look at life inside the walls of the stone castle. The keep now was the main living quarters of the lord and the lady. Their private living and sleeping quarters or bedroom was known as the solar. So this was a section of the house that contained their private rooms, their day room, their garderobe, which would be a toilet, and their sleeping quarters. This would usually be located on the top floor of the castle. Underneath that would be the Great Hall. This was on the middle floor, and it was where feasts and important meetings were held. In fact, this was where the court for the local area would be. The Lord would be the judge for any disputes in his territory, and the court would take place in this Great Hall. You would even have to go here to get permission to marry, and we'll look at that in more detail when we're looking at the life of a peasant. It was also in this place that they would host great banquets and they would be entertained. They would serve a variety of meats and fish dishes and exotic presentations of unusual birds such as swans and peacocks. They'd serve them with their feathers on. They could also serve something called pottage, which was a type of medieval stew. For the more rich at the tables, they would get a platter or a tray of silver or gold, and with silver or gold cups, while the less important would get something called trenchers, and these were plates that were made from bread. They would often have bards who were storytellers and poets or musicians or oral historians, or they might have a minstrel or a troubadour who was a kind of a traveling musician who might come in and entertain the people at the banquet. Underneath the Great Hall, there was the guard room where the guards would be stationed should the keep be attacked. We saw their defences there in the last video. And there would be a kitchen on this level as well, where food would be prepared to be brought up for the feasts and even just for the regular meals that the lords would have. At the lowest level of the castle were the dungeons, where prisoners from the local village or manor were kept. And there was also a storehouse down there. Where food would be kept. As I said, the local lord would be the judge of the area as well. So you would be sentenced in the Great Hall, and you would be kept in the dungeons down below. Also, there would be a garderobe. This would be like hanging out at the side of a castle, and all the human waste would just drop into the pit or the moat. So like we said before, within the walls of the castle was known as the bailey. And here there were buildings such as huts for servants and soldiers. There was a forge for a blacksmith as well. There were stables for the horses, and even a garden. They would also have workshops for carpenters and masons. Sometimes they would even have a church, and they would have a well in there, also just in case they were under siege, so that they could be as self-sufficient as possible. Probably the most famous incident involving the lords in the Middle Ages was their fight to get certain rights off of the king, and this resulted in something called the Magna Carta. So in 1206, King John of England lost all of the land he had controlled in Europe except for Aquitaine to Philip II of France. So this was a step too far for the lords. They felt that the king had been demanding too many knights. Remember, they were his vassals. He demanded too many knights, or else he was looking for way too much money if they couldn't provide the knights. They felt that he acted like he could do what he wanted when he wanted, with no respect for feudal law or for them, in fact. Things got even worse when King John was excommunicated from the church in 1209. That means he was kicked out of the church because he exploited the church and its money so badly that the Pope actually kicked him out of the church. The barons then forced John into signing a document called the Magna Carta, and this put into place the rights and liberties of the clergy and the nobles, and it put a limits on the king's power. So remember, the king had been given his power from God, but now the nobles and the lords were telling him that he was not all powerful, and that he had to respect the feudal law and their rights and their liberties. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. So by now you guys should know the structure of the keep and what was on each floor. So you would know that the solar was on the top floor, underneath it the great hall, then you would have the kitchen and the guardhouse, and then you would have the dungeon and the storerooms underneath that. You guys would need to know 3 facts about what might happen in the great hall, so you guys would know that this is where local courts would be held. You guys would know what feasts would go on here, the type of food that might be eaten at feasts, the type of entertainment that we had at the feasts also, even down to the platters and the trenchers that we were looking at as well. And finally, you guys should know the buildings that might have been inside the bailey of a castle. So whether that's the forge or the servants and soldiers' huts, or the workhouses. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. Hope you guys got something good from this video.